Hello, everyone. Welcome to PlacemakingUS Summer Assembly. It's been about 9 months since we got together and did a network-wide update. I always cheat a little and do the end of the year stuff in October, so it's been a minute, and there's so much to catch up on the network, on places we've been, projects we've been visiting, keeping in touch in across the country and connecting. As well as we want to hear updates from you guys and have you share what you're working on with each other, what is coming up, points of convergence, and hopefully we'll leave today with a lot of energy, maybe a few more connections in your pocket for your project that you're working on, or inspiration for the next thing that you're trying to get accomplished. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if I can find that one now. Here we go. Share screen. Okay, cool. And I've got a little presentation here. It goes like this. Great. Hey, can everyone see that good? Well, not if you're doing it right. Okay. So yeah, I'll go through some network updates for hopefully about a half an hour. And then we're going to break into smaller groups so we can update each other on a more personal level. And then we'll come back to the big room and see where the energy and points of convergence are. So first up and foremost, network updates. So we started off the year up in South Park, Seattle, way in the top left northwest corner of the country. We've been working there with Kote Sorens, who's a community member, and a group she formed called Reconnect South Park. And they had the vision of removing a freeway, a redundant freeway that goes through their Latinx neighborhood. And in working with them, we were up there helping them do their outreach plan for their project and have helped them get over $2 million in funding towards this vision since we first heard about it in 2021. So it's such an amazing project to be a part of and see what's going on the ground there. And these freeway removals and infrastructure equity projects is a big theme throughout the year of what we've been working on. And we went right up from, chilly Seattle in winter down to warm and saucy New Orleans for a placemaking weekend in February, where we hosted a group to experience really the extreme placefulness of New Orleans, the local food, the sites, the culture, the parades, and the neighborhoods. We had both an arts and culture, but also a health, ecology, and equity lens to this project. We got to tour the Treme neighborhood, which is a famous Black musical neighborhood with Amy Stelly, and actually tour the freeway removal project or freeway reimagination project that she's been spearheading down there. Which was the inspiration for the South Park project that we were just working on the week before. And so it was really interesting and awesome. We got to do bike rides with Bike Easy and look at the bike infrastructure. We toured the oldest business district in New Orleans, which was originally an indigenous trading post then and now is a Black business district with Dash John Jordan, who's doing amazing revitalization work in the mid-city area. We were even at the Contemporary Art Center with George Shearer, who was showing us how their Contemporary Art Museum is trying to weaponize artists and creative placemaking to solve the real forefront of problems in racism and climate change in their city. Then we left that project and went over to Southern California, and we were do every year some foodways placemaking programs in the early spring in SoCal. And so we were doing some farmers market placemaking out there, getting feedback, adding furniture, and adding kids areas and programming to farmers markets. Also doing some policy advocacy around a really interesting new law in California, which allows people to add open home restaurants, so they can either host people in their home for limited meals, or they can do delivery or takeout from their home kitchens. And we saw this as a really interesting way to promote, 15-minute neighborhoods and diversifying and retrofitting suburbia. And so very interesting to learn a lot more about that law. Currently, it's only in California, Wyoming, and a few other states. I think actually, Turner, you're here, Utah, I think has also made that a law. And we bounced from the West Coast to the East Coast down to Florida to, oops, I think I skipped a slide, down to Jacksonville, Florida. And we have a great relationship with the placemaker in Jacksonville, Katie, who's Katie Yellow, who was formerly in Flint. She's doing amazing things down there with an entire placemaking Jax program, which is a grant-funded program where she taps the community's talent to become the producer of their own content and helps alleviate the barriers like insurance and permitting, which are really the huge stopper of everything fun happening in the US. So it was great to tour with her, but she's in particular involved in a neighborhood down there called the East Side or Out East. And it's a 300-year-old Gullah Geechee African-American neighborhood. And we got the pleasure of walking this neighborhood, I guess, in September of last year with Amy Stelly, who showed us around New Orleans and identified a lot of placemaking projects that they could be tackling. And Katie continued to work with them and a local group called Lift Jax and got around $200,000 in funding. And it was amazing to see all the transformations that's happened there. The group has really formalized into the Eastside Legacy Business Council. And so they're starting to now want to go out to learn. I think some of their group just went up and visited Majora Carter up in the Bronx. So we're starting to see amazing transformation on the ground, but also then these people becoming connected more deeply to our entire network. And then, we always like to have one crazy idea in the hopper, and this one was one of those, and it came true, and it was really wonderfully and beautifully executed, and added so much to the network, and was so much fun. But we went on a placemaking train trip on Amtrak, and we started off. I'll start off the trip kind of in Atlanta, and this is where Ethan Kent from PlacemakingUS met up with me. We met with staff from the International Society of Urban Health, who are planning a big conference there in Atlanta in November that we're going to be at. Got to visit, of course, the Beltline and great sites like the Pond City Market, Adaptive Reuse Project, but also spent some time in Martin Luther King's original neighborhood and looked at a lot of the public space issues there that I hope we're going to get to engage with when we're back there in November, because there is a lot of issues going on in that neighborhood. Ethan, we got our next stop was down in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was Ethan's first time to Birmingham. Birmingham is really an incredible place, especially when your tour guide is Carmen Mays, who's one of our amazing PlacemakingUS leaders and goes all over the world for placemaking events, but is working with the city of Birmingham at the council office. And she showed off, for example, this was a new BRT station that she had been advocating for and helped, get built over 10 years. One of the superlative things we saw in Birmingham this time was a 10-block long, very expensive park being built underneath a brand new interstate. This was really interesting to see because, as you've seen, we're talking a lot and visiting a lot of infrastructure equity sites, and this was one of the most expensive and extensive build outs of an under interstate sort of implementation. So it was really a superlative case study and something that wasn't on our radar at all. But we saw a lot of great things in Birmingham, the 4th Street Historic Business Corridor. We went to one of the earliest baseball stadiums in the country. There's so much to see there. I can't do it justice here. And my screen is kind of fuzzing here for a second. Hold on, why are you doing this? Okay. And then we went off to the New Orleans area and got to actually stop in some small towns. Ray Scriber, who leads the Main Street America program for Louisiana, is super wonderful and always connects us with small towns across the state. I think I've been to more small towns in Louisiana than anywhere in this country. And we got to visit Hammond, which was named, I think, one of the Main Street of America, small towns of America. In particular, they wanted to show us off their rail yard park that they'd redeveloped and had beautifully activated with a farmer's market. And it was an incredible spot. We went right across the Lake Pontchartrain to Slidell, also another small town, to meet with their Main Street manager. They were having their annual crawfish festival, and it was just so much natural placemaking, just beautiful, food, shade, people, music. But it was kind of a little disheartening because we were talking with a lot of people about, people starting to not want to talk to each other because some people wanting to ban books and some people wanting to, believe in science and truth and librarians and things like that. And so it was really shocking to see just on the everyday street level, people talking about these really schism issues that was really driving people apart, that we could see not very common thing you hear people talking about seeing. That continued on in Jackson, Mississippi, where we went for a really surprisingly amazing conference called the Neighborhood Economics Conference. It's actually put on in part by Tim Sorens, who's the husband of Cote Sorens, who we've been working on with the South Park freeway removal. This conference is kind of the intersection of faith and finance. So there were a lot of churches with a lot of property, doing a lot of redevelopment, affordable housing, building community space, new business spaces for their community, revitalizing their communities, putting together capital stacks. We learned so many interesting things about, the positionality of really shifting ownership in this country and really creating, really having Black people create Black equity and pathways for that. And for example, there was one group there from Crenshaw out in Los Angeles who they'd raised $60 million to buy the Crenshaw Mall. They were called hashtag 40 acres and a mall. And just learning about, we hear people talk a lot about like redlining and things like that. And you kind of hear people stop there. But the story continues, and there are things out there like the CRA, CDFI, CDCs, all these mechanisms, CDBG, out there that they were really talking about the mechanics of finance at this conference for making equity and change happen. And the next one's going to be in San Antonio, and I couldn't recommend that conference highly enough. But I will add, though, that in Jackson, there was also this incredible talk of racial issues, because there had been these new House laws passed where majority of the Black communities live in the city of Jackson, and there was now being developed a special police force called the Capitol Police and a different judicial system for people living within the Capital District, which is where most African Americans in Mississippi live. So just hearing the divide there, where a lot of white residents we talked to felt very good about these new laws and thought that they were going to do things like alleviate homeless issues or allow them to, go out to dinner and not be bothered by somebody, and then hearing Black residents be completely horrified and terrified by these same set of laws. And people all over this region were talking about this law, and it was really shocking to be exposed to. And so then we transitioned up to the north, and we were in Chicago very briefly, but very excited to meet with placemakers on the ground to hear that, there's a new day in Chicago, that there's a lot of interest in placemaking in general. They're not calling it placemaking, but there's incredible interest in revitalization of the usage of the street spaces and obviously the great parks of the city. So that was all fun. And I should add that that's where Ethan ended up having to leave the train trip, and we gained another passenger, which was Evan Snow from Zero Empty Spaces down in Florida, who was an amazing travel companion and works on very creative revitalization projects for his downtown, as well as others, turning vacant spaces into artist studio spaces. And so we then got, I think probably was one of the best surprises of the trip, which was Fort Wayne, Indiana. We were hosted beautifully by Cornelia Schultz, who just really set it up so that we saw so many people and so many things while we were there, starting with their downtown, which has a GEL-produced public space plan, including some really innovative approaches to their utilizing their alleyways as a secondary transportation and place network. Also in their alleys, they had visually accessible murals. So each of the murals had a 3D printed sort of feeler representation that people who have blindness or sight impairment could utilize to access the murals, which was super cool. They also had a like $1 million square foot redo. I think it was a $600 million project of their General Electric park, which was really interesting to see because you could go to Schenectady, New York, for example, where they have the exact same buildings and they're in ruin. And this was a complete renovation of that into, a food-driven public market, innovation space, meeting space, art space, office space, all this type of stuff. And there's so many campuses around in the Rust Belt that haven't attempted something like this, and it was really wonderfully executed and a surprise, and doubles the square footage of their downtown. But even there was other like small little things about Fort Wayne, like this like mural training zone where a resident had worked, I believe, with Cornelia, and they set up this area where people who aren't quite at doing murals yet professionally can take a small space and do their own sort of like learning mural. And it was really cool to see that. Then we shot over to Erie, Pennsylvania, and we got to actually hang out with Patrick Fisher, who was the head of the Erie Arts and Council for the last few years. And we're really excited to see him on his last day because he had come to our engagement in Flint, Michigan in 2021 and was so inspired by the Flint Public Art Project's proliferation of murals there and how murals really connect neighborhoods, because so much of the urban fabric is disappeared and the murals are so prolific, that he came back and partnered with the United Way, and they've raised about $1 million to do murals along the safe routes to school in Erie. So we actually got to see some of those impacts. Some of those muralists were recommended from our national network of creative placemakers as well. Talk to the business owners, learn about how the murals really helped raise awareness about the safe routes to school in Erie and elevated that whole program. And just the amount of transformation it was able to create was incredible. It was so shocking and beautiful to see that we were able to connect those dots for people, and they made such an impact. Then we were recommended to go visit these wonderful artists up in Rochester, New York, who have been helping with the infrastructure inequity issues there and the freeway removal and replacement. So we got a firsthand tour of one of the nation's case studies of where they removed the 8 acres of the inner loop freeway and replaced it with housing. And when they look back at what went right and what went wrong with this before they then are about to do, I believe, 24 more acres, they felt that the lack of community engagement led to a lack of great urban product being created in the end result. And so what these artists are doing with the next phase is they're actually training every group of interested party to do their own PowerPoint presentations on what they envision for the next phase. And so the children have their own PowerPoint presentation, the businesses have their own PowerPoint presentation. Everyone's been given the tools of creation. So not necessarily to all sit in the room and argue, but to all sit together and create their own vision and dream. So very interested to see how that pans out. We were really enchanted by Rochester, and we're excited to be joined by urban professor and author Conrad Kickert, who has a very adventurous spirit. And we actually got to do a little bit of, I guess, urban spelunking or anthropology, climbing into, this was definitely, I think, the highlight, abandoned space that I got to explore this year so far, but it was the old subway tunnels underneath Rochester that the artists that we were visiting are looking at resuscitating into some kind of an art space. Also in Rochester, nominee for the most beautiful parking garage in the world, but we'll get to see who throws that competition. And then we got to meet up with an amazing North New York artist, Tina Dillman, social practice artist, and hang out and explore Hudson, New York. And I think whenever you tell people you're like, Hudson, New York, there's a lot of like, oh, that's such a rich area, or oh, it's the, only these expats from New York are there. But I saw so much low-cost, creative placemaking and just incredible community building approaches on display there that I think any small town that's looking to revive its spark should definitely go there and just be anything's possible. It's really, I mean, I thought I was really surprised and delighted, and we had a great time hanging out there. Then we went to New York City and we hosted another placemaking weekend. This was incredible star-studded event. It started with the Placemaking X training. Then we went on to tour Rockefeller Center with Fred Kent and 6th Avenue with Tim Tompkins. Mike Lydon, who wrote Tactical Urbanism, took us along Broadway, and we got to see the transformation from temporary materials to permanent materials, of how that's becoming a pedestrian series of pedestrian spaces and paths. We went up to the Bronx with Majora Carter and got to see her projects and hear her story of being, trying to create assets in, a community that didn't have a lot of assets, and then being kind of pushed out and called a gentrifier, and really all of the work that she's done to be able to be herself in her community, doing the work that she's doing and the pushback that she's gotten. People were really inspired by that. And getting to hang out with Nate Storing and talk about Jane Jacobs at Washington Square Park. I mean, I must be lame, but I had never heard the story before that Washington Square Park was a roundabout for buses to turn around, and before it was a park. It was just incredible. Guillermo Bernal pre-premiered his movie on the life of Fred Kent, which was also incredible to see, because we'd just been in spaces like Bryant Park and seen how active and beautiful they were, and to see where they were before the placemaking activities and the programming that started there. Had done things. We did all kinds of great stuff in New York. We shot across the is it the Hudson, I guess, and then to New Jersey, and we spoke at the Creative Placemaking Leadership Summit. This is a group that has a summit every year in the Northeast and then also in the South. And it was really fun because we got to bring some of our global network to speak at this and bring a global perspective, which is like one of the ultimate highlights of what we get to do. And we don't get to do that enough in North America. We don't get to bring enough of our overseas placemakers here. We really need to work on that. And Ethan and I shot down to Philadelphia and had a great time checking in with Katrina Johnston Zimmerman, who is running South Street Business Improvement District, which is kind of I would call it the Melrose of Philadelphia, but like the, hip kind of like where you get a tattoo and art galleries and this and that kind of street. And also with Nate Hommel, who runs the University District and does landscape architecture there and built the porch and all kinds of great stuff going on there. It was just a quick visit, but I mean, Ethan's always trying to stimulate more interaction with Philadelphia because it's so underrepresented in all of its achievements. And then I went over to State College, Pennsylvania, which is one of these superlative college towns where we have PlacemakingUS leaders, Spud Marshall and Erica Quinn, and they were running a creative communities summit really for people throughout the state of Pennsylvania, but just incredible facilitation. Spud has been trained in the art of hosting, and he created these open spaces, these other activities where you had to go on on a boat, a canoe with somebody, and listen to them talk for 20 minutes straight, and just all these incredible interactions. So he's a national figure in really eliciting collaborative wisdom and these spaces for people of all kind of all levels to come together and really build something together. So it was a fantastic thing to be a part of. And we jetted up from there to Montreal, Canada, for the Global Cultural Districts Network. And this is a network that we became aware of through our colleagues at Placemaking Europe. But it's basically, they define a cultural district as a geographic area that has a series of cultural institutions and a managing organization above it. So you have everything from like the Dallas Arts District to Little Caribbean on Nostrand Avenue in New York City. So it was a really amazing spectrum of place managers. And we got to bring Tisha Lee from Tippecanoe Arts Federation in Indiana, and also Katie Yellow to go speak. Robin Abad Akibio, from the planning director from San Francisco, now the planning director for Oakland, was also there, as well as Ramon Morales from Placemaking Europe, the director of Placemaking Europe. Montreal, obviously, such an amazing summer city. The activations at night in the public plazas with lights, the arts, the markets, the festivals, so incredible, but also great that we could bring a cohort of placemakers to represent, you know, what we do. And I thought a really poignant moment of this was where somebody was talking about in Katie Yellow's session about, well, you know, there's people in our downtown who are undesirable, and we can't do art there because they're there. And she said, well, have you engaged them about what their creative talents are? And it was kind of one of those moments where, you know, the room got cold, like just, you know, wow, everybody's people. Everybody belongs in some way and can maybe participate. And it was just so great for us to be there. We shot down to Washington, D.C. and got a great tour of the city from Brian Bird, who's a local planner, and everything from, you know, markets in the abandoned parking lot of a crumbling stadium to the hottest new public spaces. There's so much happening in DC. And from DC, we started a partnership that we had called the City Building Exchange, which is a 3-day bus tour that we co-planned with Nathan Norris, who has, I believe, originated it about a decade ago, and then also Ryan Stevenson from CNU Southwest out in Tucson. And this was a 700-mile, 15 project tour with 25 urbanists looking at you know, basically the last 50, 60, well, actually the last 300 years of urbanism in the area around DC, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. We toured traditional neighborhood developments. These are neighborhoods that are emulating old style towns that, you know, there's a lot of promoted by Congress for New Urbanism, as well as revitalized town centers, urban renewal projects, classic projects like the architecture of Thomas Jefferson, adaptive reuse projects like the Durham American Tobacco campus, and the wharf out in DC. So the cool thing about this this trip is really it's like a classroom on a bus, and everyone gets to look and explore these different environments, but then we get to share, talk about them, debate, there's fights, and it's just really wonderful experience. And jetted from that to Raleigh, North Carolina, where Tina Govan, who's a PlacemakingUS leader and Placemaking Raleigh leader, had us speaking with their urban agriculture collective and touring projects across the city, especially getting us involved in this really exciting story of Jessica Peacocks, who wanted to reopen her grandfather's market, but found the zoning had changed on it. And so she had to fight the city and re-change the zoning so she could open up her market. And so now we're working with her a little bit on a placemaking inspired approach to getting the next steps of that market up and running. And we flew from from over there, from North Carolina out to Portland, Oregon, where we were first a part of a really quick little thing called Assembly, which is Portland State University's Social Practice Arts Festival. And in particular this year, it took place at a school that's called KS Mocha. Well, it's called King's Elementary School. It's the first school named after Martin Luther King. And now they have a program there called KS Mocha, King's School Museum of Contemporary Art, where some of the art students work with the students at the school, the elementary kids, and they run a museum of contemporary art out of the school. And they have exhibitions, and they contract artists to do work. And they had an incredible project up right now about redlining, about infrastructure equity, and the taking of Black neighborhoods in Portland, Oregon. And it was so wonderful to see. And it's not on a lot of people's radar to go there, but I've been there twice, and I think it's really something amazing. And then we were really in Portland for the Village Build Convergence, which is such an incredible event. It takes place every year. It's about a 20-year-old event put on by a group called City Repair. This is actually their T-Horse, it's called. It's their mobile, sort of mobile pop-up placemaking, spirit animal. And it comes with tea and blankets and pillows, and it pops up in different parts of the city, and it supports sort of these transformative projects of retaking the grid and turning sort of I guess they kind of say like the Roman grid back into village life. And they have all these incredible theories, and it's a beautiful blend of humor, creativity, anthropology, architecture, permaculture. It's one of the most creative and fun takes on placemaking in the country. And it works too. I mean, we were out there in some of the worst intersections in the city, and then doing charrettes and coming up with transformation projects that then we know will happen. We got to tour and become familiarized with some of the amazing housing opportunities that are being innovated in Portland, from eco villages, which are kind of it's urban density, but you're kind of in a farm environment, all the way to different homeless shelters. I don't know why there's a big picture of that, but I think because every night there's a potluck, and there's learning lectures, and there's cultural sort of gatherings. And so it's a very rich thing, but really the paramount experience of going out there to Portland this year into the Village Building Convergence was stepping into what they call Share It Square. And this is this is the original intersection painting that they did illegally 20 years ago, or however long, I believe that's how long it was. And every year they've adorned and continue to update this intersection and transform it from a place where cars blast through to a place for people. And I mean, this site boasts things like the very first Little Free Library is on one of the corners. There's a gazebo on another. There's a tea station on another of the corners. There's a kids sort of tree house on another. Oops. So it's just this space. When you step into it, it's like nothing you've ever experienced, I think, in a suburban setting of transformation of what's possible in a placemaking setting. So that was kind of what we've been up to the last 6 months. A lot of travel and a lot of interaction. And I hope you can see some of the lines and dots that start to connect, and how we've been so lucky to be able to meet people who show us or teach us something, and then we can transfer that knowledge over across the country and have real impact. And so I did want to highlight some of the new initiatives that we've been working on and will continue to be working on. But one is that we've started creating these online learning modules or lessons, and we've had about 4 of them. We did one on placemaking in food. There's one on turning vacant spaces into vibrant spaces, which we did with Culture House out of the Boston area. There was placemaking in Espanol, placemaking in Spanish that we did with Placemaking Mexico. And then we just recently did with Carolyn Levine from This Must Be the Place. Oops, we got lucky. this must be the place, so you want to be a placemaker. And also Carmen Mays and Hayden Plemons jumped on that. And these have been really awesome to share just some, outlines and best practices within these fields of different items. And we'd love to partner with more superlative placemaking organizations to do more of these trainings. They're available then for forever on our website, so people can then access them there. So there's a lot more to do. Also, we've really enjoyed doing these Placemaking US weekends. So obviously we talked about the one we did in New Orleans, the one we did in New York. There's been trips to Oregon and Michigan. And we want to continue doing those weekends where we bring a group of placemakers, we show off all the exciting things happening in a neighborhood, in a city, within a theme, and it really raises the energy and creates a lot of new connections for people. We are going to be doing a placemaking weekend at the end of August in Baja with Placemaking Mexico. And this will be really great because we're exploring Ensenada, Tijuana, Las Playas, Val de Guadalupe, and I think Puerto Nuevo. So it's food, it's what do borders mean, working with Latinos. There's so many different lessons, tactical urbanism. We'll do some place games. So this will be a really awesome trip. And also we're working on a placemaking weekend in Miami in December. So during Art Basel, you have world-class art there, you have cultural districts, we have great folks working in co-working, climate change, public space, place management. So really excited to bring people down there and experience that trip. And then we also do another program besides our placemaking weekends, which we call our placemaking exchanges. And this is where we just bring a few experts to a city or a neighborhood and look at a bunch of opportunities that could be done. So this would be like the work that we've done in Jacksonville, where we've gone, about every 6 months, just a few of us, and have, created a lot of momentum and helped connect dots and programs and give vernacular and language to on-the-ground initiatives, and not really be in the way too much of what's happening, but just helping connect the dots and create a forward momentum. Also, we've done some of this in Santa Ana, where we brought some of the leading Latino placemakers like Jaime from Storefront Placemaking, and also Guillermo came up from Placemaking Mexico and did some pop-ups, some placemaking, and gave some direction around activating public spaces for Latinos. So looking ahead, we have on our website a global placemaking calendar, which you can add to or just look at and see what's going on around the world and the country. But I recommend checking that out, and I'll just highlight some of the big things to be on your radar, which are Placemaking Week Europe, which is going to be in Strasbourg. That's coming up really fast, end of September, and it's just such a great, energetic global touch point for the placemaking movement. I love that event. Everybody loves that event. It's so fun, and it's mind-blowing. The way the conversation is in Europe should set the tone for, I think, everywhere. So oops, that's a weird slide to have there. Then also Placemaking X is having a global summit in Mexico City. And it's important to know this summit is not like a traditional conference where you're going to go and there's speakers and this and that. It's really a working congress on 40 agendas, and how do we move these agendas forward to move the placemaking movement forward. So this is global work, but of course you're going to connect with amazing people from all over, and I know a lot of people who can't typically make it over to North America are going to be able to make it to that event. So it is something to definitely keep on your radar. And then Project for Public Spaces also will have their International Placemaking Week early next year. I don't think they've picked a city yet, but they had announced some finalists like Baltimore, Houston, San Francisco, and I think Tampa. So we'll see where that is going to be, but that'll definitely be a great national event to check into. All right, so sorry I went a little long, but there's so much to talk about. And now we want to give some space for you guys to share, what you've been working on, what you've been struggling with, what you've been kicking butt on, what, new things you want to share, what you, where you're going to be, what's coming up, and where the convergence is. So